No one in the courtroom expected what happened next. The young woman standing at the defense table, well-dressed, steady-voiced, the daughter of one of the most powerful CEOs in the state, had insisted again and again that she hadn't hit anyone with her car. Her record was clean, her tone confident, her story unwavering. But as Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward, tapping a single finger on the bench, an officer approached with a tablet in hand, holding the kind of evidence no one ever anticipates. And the moment the screen lit up, the entire room fell silent. Because the proof wasn't from a police cruiser or a traffic camera, it was from a delivery drone, floating above the street at the exact moment of the incident. And what it captured made the defendant's face drain of color. It was a gray morning in Providence, the kind where the clouds seemed stitched low over the skyline. The courtroom was already full. Students from a local college, a couple of elderly regulars who loved watching Judge Caprio's sessions, reporters who seemed to have caught wind that something interesting might happen today. A murmur spread through the benches as Ava Morrison, 23, polished, composed, and the daughter of tech billionaire Charles Morrison, stepped forward to face a charge most didn't expect from someone raised in privilege. Leaving the scene of a minor accident, she was accused of sideswiping an elderly man's parked vehicle and driving off without reporting it. A simple hit and run, nothing catastrophic, but unethical, illegal, and deeply disappointing from someone in her position. Yet something felt off. Ava didn't look reckless or entitled. She didn't have that air of arrogance people often associated with wealth. Her shoulders were tense, her hands clasped together so tight the knuckles were pale. Her eyes not defiant, but searching, kept drifting toward the door. Something was beneath the surface, something she wasn't saying. And as everyone waited for Judge Caprio to begin, the atmosphere felt thick, not just with curiosity, but with the sense that this story was about to unravel in a way no one expected. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses, scanning the file before him. His voice, warm yet steady, broke the tension. "Good morning, Miss Morrison." Ava swallowed. "Good morning, Your Honor." Caprio had seen thousands of defendants, from teenagers shaking in fear to seniors with nothing left to lose. But Ava Morrison, she looked like someone who had been raised to win at everything, including life. A skill that doesn't translate well to a courtroom where truth outshines presentation. He watched her carefully. There was something fragile behind her carefully composed posture, a vulnerability she was working hard to hide. Caprio leaned back slightly, letting his experience do what it always did: read people beyond their words. In his mind, a quiet reflection surfaced. Everyone comes into this courtroom with a story. Some hide behind excuses, some behind anger, some behind tears, and some behind a mask they've worn for so long, they forget it's not their real face. The truth always finds its way out. The question is whether the person can bear it when it arrives. Ava Morrison had grown up in the public eye not as a celebrity, but as the daughter of a man who built a tech empire that seemed to shape half the devices in the room. Her childhood was all headlines and expectations. Her teenage years, prep schools, charity events, business internships designed to prepare her for a future she never chose. Her adulthood, lonely apartments, rigid schedules, a phone that never stopped buzzing with responsibilities she hadn't asked for. She was raised to be perfect, and perfection leaves no room for mistakes or confessions. The courtroom didn't know that 2 weeks before this incident, Ava had moved out of her father's mansion, that she had cut ties with his company, that she had been trying desperately to live like a normal person for once. She had taken a modest apartment, bought a used car, started working quietly at a youth center. She was trying to find herself. But on the night of the alleged accident, she wasn't thinking about personal growth. She wasn't thinking about expectations. She was thinking about breathing, just breathing, as she drove through Providence with tears she hadn't let fall for years. Because hours earlier, she had received a phone call that broke her, in a way no mansion, no money, no last name could protect her from. And though she hadn't told anyone yet, the truth of that night wasn't about the car, or the scrape on a vehicle, or the alleged hit and run. It was about what drove her mind so far away from the present moment, that she didn't even know what she had done. Judge Caprio cleared his throat. Miss Morrison, you are charged with leaving the scene of an accident involving property damage. How do you plead? Ava lifted her chin slightly. Not guilty, Your Honor. I didn't hit anyone's car. Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled against one another. Caprio raised a brow. You're certain of that? Yes, Your Honor. The officer standing beside the prosecution table stepped forward. Your Honor, we have external footage of the incident. A faint ripple moved through the courtroom. Caprio nodded gently. Miss Morrison, would you like to say anything before we proceed? Ava hesitated. Her throat seemed tight. She shook her head. No, Your Honor. Her eyes flickered, not with guilt, but with fear. Judge Caprio motioned to the officer. Let's see the footage. As the tablet was handed up to the bench, Ava's breath caught. Judge Caprio noticed, and the courtroom leaned in. The officer spoke quietly. Your Honor, the video is from a delivery drone. The company routinely records footage for navigation and liability. A few people in the audience whispered in surprise. Judge Caprio tapped the screen. The video began grainy at first, then stabilizing. The angle was high above the street where the incident occurred. A small sedan Ava's moved along the curb, and then a scrape, a jolt, the car brushing the bumper of a parked vehicle, her brake lights flickering on for only half a second, then off again. Ava flinched, hard. Judge Caprio watched, not with judgment but with something deeper, something searching. When the screen went dark, the silence was suffocating. Caprio looked at her over the rim of his glasses. Miss Morrison, are you still saying you didn't hit anything? Ava's lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes shimmered. Something was breaking. Inside her, a truth she had refused to face was pushing its way to the surface. Ava closed her eyes for a long moment, too long. Her breath trembled in her chest as if she were trying to hold back a storm. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I don't remember hitting anything, Your Honor. I swear I don't. Judge Caprio's tone softened. You don't remember? Or you're saying it didn't happen? A ripple of tension passed through the spectators. The distinction mattered. Ava opened her eyes. They were filled with something raw, something she had tried to bury. I'm saying, she swallowed. I'm saying I wasn't fully aware that night. Caprio leaned forward. Why not? The question broke her composure. Her lips quivered. She looked down at her hands as though ashamed of the truth they were about to release. I wasn't myself. I wasn't thinking clearly. I didn't even know where I was driving for part of it. Her breath hitched. I didn't drink. I wasn't on anything. I just... Tears slipped down her face. I wasn't okay. The courtroom shifted, the atmosphere shifting from suspicion to concern. Caprio's voice was gentle. Miss Morrison, the court needs clarity. If there's something you have not told us now, is the time to tell it. Ava nodded slowly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand, no longer caring about the expensive makeup smudging at the edges. I got a phone call, she whispered. Right before I got in the car that night. Her voice cracked as she continued. My older brother, the only person I ever really confided in, he attempted suicide. A gasp rippled through the room. Ava's shoulders shook, but she forced the words out. He didn't succeed, thank God. But I didn't know that when I got in the car. All I heard was, he's in the hospital. It's bad. And something inside me just shattered. Her eyes lifted, full of pain. I wasn't running away from hitting the car. I wasn't trying to avoid responsibility. Her voice collapsed. I wasn't conscious enough to even realize what I'd done. A hushed heaviness fell over the courtroom. Even those who walked in expecting to judge her were now quietly swallowing the lump in their throats. Judge Caprio let her confession sit in the air for a moment. There was no rush in his courtroom when a person was unraveling. He gave space. He gave breath. He spoke softly. Miss Morrison, I'm sorry about your brother. Ava nodded, lips pressed together. Caprio continued. Why didn't you tell the officer who contacted you? Why not explain this earlier? Ava let out a breath, not defensive, but defeated. My father, she whispered. Caprio's brow furrowed. He told me to say nothing. He didn't want the press involved. He didn't want anyone to know about my brother's mental health crisis. He said silence was the safest strategy. That we'd fight the footage, discredit the angle, do whatever was needed. Her voice cracked again. He said, admitting I was emotionally unstable that night would make the family look weak. That people don't forgive weakness in powerful families. Caprio's jaw tightened, not in anger at her, but at the notion that humanity should be hidden to preserve a brand. So you came in here today prepared to defend something you weren't even sure was true? Ava nodded, shame spreading across her face. Yes, I didn't want to lie, but I also wasn't allowed to tell the truth. Caprio tapped a finger on the bench, slow, thoughtful. And what changed? He asked quietly. What made you speak the truth just now? Her eyes flicked to the tablet, then back to him. You, she whispered. The way you asked. The way you looked at me. You weren't trying to trap me or humiliate me. You just wanted honesty. And I haven't been honest with anyone in months. A tear slipped down her cheek. I'm tired, Your Honor. Tired of pretending to be fine. Tired of protecting a family legacy that never protected me. I didn't want to lie anymore. The courtroom was silent. Emotion was thick, real, heavy, human. The prosecutor stepped forward, clearing his throat. Your Honor, the state is sympathetic to Miss Morrison's situation. But the footage, Ava's eyes shot toward him, fear sparking again. The prosecutor continued, contains something else. A murmur swept the benches. Even Caprio's expression shifted. Something else? He echoed. Yes, Your Honor. The prosecutor held up another device. The drone recorded audio partial, but audible enough. Ava's face drained. Caprio gestured for it to be played. The officer pressed a button. A faint wind sound filled the courtroom, then a voice, broken, panicked. Please, don't die. Please don't die. Ava clutched the defense table. Her own voice, raw and agonizing, echoed from the speakers. I'm coming, Liam. I'm coming. I'm coming. Her breathless sobs filled the courtroom like a ghost trapped in the audio clip. The spectators looked away, some wiping their eyes. The prosecutor paused the clip. That audio was captured moments after the collision, he said quietly. We believe Miss Morrison genuinely did not realize she had hit the parked vehicle. Caprio's eyes softened deeply more than before. He had seen pain in his courtroom for decades. But this was something painfully pure. A young woman, trying to reach her brother before it was too late. A human heart breaking loud enough that even a drone in the sky heard it. Caprio took a long breath. Miss Morrison, he said, his voice gentler than ever. Why didn't you mention this audio earlier? Ava shook her head. My father didn't want it released. He said it would expose too much. She looked up slowly. But this is the truth. All of it. Judge Caprio folded his hands. Inside, a soft ache tightened in his chest. What a world we live in, he thought, where a young woman believes she must choose between telling the truth and protecting the image of a family so focused on power, they forget their children are human. He had witnessed anger, pride, excuses, manipulation. But what sat before him now wasn't manipulation. It was a young woman drowning in expectations she never asked for, breaking open in the one room where she was finally allowed to tell the truth. He looked at Ava and saw not privilege, but pain. Not arrogance, but exhaustion. A quiet realization settled in him. Sometimes, people don't run from responsibility. They run from lives that don't let them feel anything. He exhaled slowly. The courtroom waited, silent. Caprio's internal voice continued. Justice isn't simply about punishment. It's about understanding. And compassion is not weakness. It is the measure of our humanity. He tapped the bench again, a gentle rhythm of thought. It was time to decide not just the fate of a charge, but the fate of a young woman who had finally told the truth. Judge Caprio's gaze dropped to the file in front of him. Though his mind was miles away from the typed lines of court records, he thought of the thousands of people who had stood in this courtroom, each carrying invisible battles. He thought of the power of truth and the fragility of those forced to hide it. He thought of Ava's father, of how many times he had seen parents prioritize image over the very children who gave their lives meaning. And then he thought of his own children, his own grandchildren. He wondered what might have happened if any of them ever believed they couldn't come to him in their darkest moment. A quiet ache settled behind his heart. Children don't need perfect parents, he thought. They need present ones. He looked back at Ava, her shoulders trembling, her eyes lowered, tears sliding down her face in slow, humiliating trails she didn't bother to hide anymore. Caprio realized something else. This young woman wasn't afraid of punishment. She was afraid of permission to finally be human. He lifted his chin and spoke softly. "Miss Morrison, thank you for your honesty." The simple sentence hit her harder than any accusation. Her eyes squeezed shut. Her breath quivered. Caprio continued. "Truth should never be something a person is punished for, especially when the world has given them so few safe places to speak it." The entire courtroom listened, not as spectators, but as human beings. Caprio cleared his throat gently. "I have one more question for you, Miss Morrison, and I want you to answer not as the daughter of someone powerful, but as yourself." Ava nodded, vulnerable and stripped of all pretense. "Do you regret what happened that night?" Her response came instantly, no hesitation, no calculation. "Yes," she whispered. "I regret everything about that night. Not the accident, I didn't even know it happened. I regret." Her voice broke again. "I regret that I let my life become so controlled that I didn't feel safe enough to tell anyone I was falling apart." She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "And I regret that my brother felt so alone he thought ending his life was the only way out." A sob escaped her before she could stop it. "I'm so tired of being strong for everyone. I just want him to be okay. I just want to be okay." Her painful honesty cracked open something in the room. An older woman in the back dabbed her eyes. Even one of the officers looked away, hiding emotion. Judge Caprio lifted a hand slightly, signaling for calm not from her, but from the rising tide of emotion around them. "And is he?" Caprio asked softly. "Is your brother okay now?" Ava nodded weakly. "He's recovering. He's trying. We both are." Caprio breathed out a long, slow breath. "Thank you, Miss Morrison." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a moment, a habit he had whenever he needed clarity. "The law is meant to guide us," he thought, "not strip us of our humanity." She had technically committed the offense, but intention mattered, context mattered, pain, real pain mattered. He pictured the drone footage again, her voice, her panic, her desperation. "Please, don't die. I'm coming." Those weren't the words of someone running from a mistake. They were the words of someone running towards someone they loved, afraid they might already be too late. He folded his hands once more. It was time. Caprio cleared his throat. "Miss Morrison, please stand." Ava rose slowly, her hands clasped tightly at her waist, her whole body trembling. Caprio spoke with a calm, steady gravity. "The evidence confirms that you did indeed make contact with the parked vehicle. Under ordinary circumstances, this would result in a fine and possibly community service." Ava bowed her head. She was ready to accept it. She wasn't running anymore. "But," Caprio continued, "the court has reviewed not only the footage, but the context." He paused. "Your emotional state that night was not reckless. It was shattered. You were not fleeing responsibility. You were fleeing a crisis. No person, no matter how wealthy or privileged, is ever prepared to face." Ava lifted her eyes, watery and uncertain. Caprio continued. "You should have notified the police when you realized what happened, and your father should not have advised you to remain silent. But the truth, your truth, changes everything." He leaned forward. "So here is my ruling." The courtroom held its breath. "I am dismissing the charge of leaving the scene." A wave of gasps crossed the room. Ava's mouth fell open, not in victory, but in disbelief. Caprio raised a hand to quiet the reaction. "My reason is simple. A person who is in the midst of an emotional collapse, rushing to the side of a loved one who may be dying, is not acting out of negligence or malice. They are acting out of humanity. Ava swallowed hard, tears thickening again. But, Caprio added gently, I will assign one requirement. She nodded, ready. You will complete 20 hours of volunteer service at the Youth Mental Health Center of your choosing. Ava blinked. Mental health? Yes, Caprio said softly. You and your brother are on a difficult journey. But you are not alone. And there are young people in this city who need someone who understands what it feels like to be overwhelmed, while the world expects perfection. A sob escaped her lips. This wasn't punishment. It was purpose. Caprio's voice grew even gentler. And Miss Morrison, tell your father that truth is not a liability. And compassion is not weakness. He may learn something from you yet. A faint, heartbroken smile trembled onto Ava's face. Thank you, Your Honor, she whispered. Truly. Caprio nodded. Case dismissed. The gavel never sounded so soft. As Ava thanked the court and walked toward the exit, the courtroom remained unusually quiet. Not because of tension, but because everyone had witnessed something rare. Not a verdict, not a legal victory, but a human moment. A moment where truth finally broke through the armor of image and expectation. A moment where privilege meant nothing and pain meant everything. Judge Caprio watched Ava go her steps lighter than when she arrived, though her journey ahead would not be simple. He thought again of the lesson that had guided him through decades of serving justice. Behind every mistake is a beating heart. Behind every case is a human story. And sometimes, understanding that story is the most important judgment of all. The courtroom doors closed softly behind her. And somewhere, deep inside the walls of that old Rhode Island courthouse, humanity felt just a little more possible.